Listen. Come closer, let me tell you a story about a woman named Mora, the woman everyone calls a nobody. The woman everyone thought that she asked like a weirdo. How that same woman was saving the whole community all along. Nobody screamed that morning. Nobody ran or shouted. The town of Oduk looked normal, quiet like any other day, but something was already wrong, even if nobody could see it. People moved about their routine as usual. Children chased each other across the dusty roads. Women swept the fronts of their houses. Men carried baskets and tools to work. And through it all, a woman walked slowly down the main street, her eyes calm, her hands folded, unnoticed by everyone. That woman was Mora, and no one knew that her quiet life held the key to the town's peace. Mora had always been quiet. She never shouted, never demanded attention, and never tried to show off. People passed her by every day, saying nothing, greeting her half-heartedly, or not at all. Some whispered that she was strange, others said she was lucky because she never complained. Yet Mora's silence hid a life of patience and care that nobody could imagine. Her gentle eyes carried the weight of people's small problems, the children she guided, the sick she helped, the lost letters she delivered, all without anyone noticing. To the town, she was invisible. But her heart was always present. She lived alone in a small, tidy house at the edge of the town, under the shade of a tall mango tree. The house had nothing fancy, but Mora kept it neat, as if every corner whispered a secret of care. Every evening, she would sweep the yard and sit quietly on a wooden chair, watching the sun paint the sky with gold and red. Sometimes she smiled at the clouds. Sometimes her eyes looked tired, carrying thoughts too heavy for words. And every night, she prayed softly for the town, for strangers, for people who would never know she cared. Even in her solitude, Mora's heart worked for others. What nobody in Oduk realized, not even the town leaders, was that Mora had been quietly holding the town together for years. Not with money. Not with loud words or recognition. But with small acts of love and responsibility that went unnoticed. And that morning, as she walked slowly through the streets, she felt a small ache in her chest, a warning she did not yet understand. Something was about to change, something the town would notice only when it was too late. That day, Oduk would begin to learn the cost of ignoring the woman they had always taken for granted. Besties, before we go deeper into this amazing story, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, so whenever I drop another story, you will be notified. Before the town of Oduk had even opened its eyes, Mora was already moving. She walked softly down the dusty streets, her feet barely making a sound, her hands carrying invisible burdens. No one saw her, no one noticed her, yet she was everywhere. She unlocked the small community hall before anyone arrived, swept the floors, arranged the chairs, and dusted every corner. Then she walked to the old water tap near the market, making sure it worked properly, even fixing small leaks nobody else would see. Every small act was unnoticed, yet without her, the town's daily life would crumble quietly. People in Oduk thought Mora had nothing to do because they never saw her rush or complain. Some whispered she was lazy. Others said she was lucky, free to walk around as she pleased. But nobody knew that while they slept, Mora guided lost children home, delivered letters for neighbors who could not read, and stayed with the sick and elderly until they felt safe again. When someone thanked her, she only smiled and walked away. Her silence made her invisible, but it was a shield she carried with love. That afternoon, the school teacher shouted angrily at the students because the roof had begun to leak after heavy rainfall. Chairs were scattered, water was dripping, and the children were terrified of getting wet. Parents argued loudly, blaming the school and each other. Mora stepped in quietly. She arranged the chairs, held buckets to catch the water, and guided the children to safe corners. By the time the teacher stopped shouting, everything was already under control. And yet, no one noticed her work. No one said her name. The town continued its day as if nothing had changed. When evening came, Mora sat outside her small house, looking at the sun sinking behind the horizon. Her hands were sore, and her heart felt heavy. For the first time, she wondered quietly what would happen if she did not continue her walk. Would anyone notice? Would anyone care if she stopped helping? The thought made her ache inside. Deep in her heart, a tiny, silent crack appeared, a warning she could feel but no one in the town could see. Something was beginning to shift, and Mora already knew that the town would soon learn a hard truth. That morning, Mora woke up to a strange, heavy feeling in her chest. It was not illness, but a weight she had never felt before. She sat on her bed for a long time, staring at the plain wall of her small house. The sun's first light spilled through her window, painting the room golden, yet she could not find the energy to move. For the first time in years, she told herself she would rest, not for an hour, not for a few minutes, but for the entire morning. Outside, the town of Oduk began to stir as usual. The children ran past her house, laughing, chasing one another, and shouting at the top of their voices. The market opened, and traders unloaded baskets of vegetables and goods. The schoolteacher rang the bell, expecting her students to line up. But something was off. The small problems Mora usually fixed quietly started to grow bigger. The community hall stayed locked. The old water tap leaked worse than before. Chairs were scattered at the school. For the first time, no one was there to quietly solve the little disasters Mora had always handled. As the day went on, the small cracks in Oduk's life grew into small storms. A little boy wandered near the river, unsure where to go. An old woman struggled with a basket too heavy to carry. Voices rose in frustration as neighbors argued over who should help. Normally, Mora would have stepped outside, calm and silent, taking charge without anyone noticing. But that day, she stayed indoors, listening to the chaos from a distance. Every shout, every argument, every stumble felt like a hammer hitting her heart. When evening finally came, Mora sat on her wooden chair outside her house, watching the sun sink low behind the tall mango tree. Her heart ached, not because the town was in trouble, but because even now, no one wondered where she was or why she had stopped. The children she often guided ran past without a glance. Adults argued about problems she had once solved quietly. And Mora realized the painful truth: people noticed the help, but they never noticed the helper. A silent tear fell from her eye as she whispered to the empty street, "Perhaps they will only see when it is too late." The morning sun rose over Oduk, but the town felt different. Something in the air was heavier, almost like the town itself had noticed Mora's absence. The streets were busier than usual with voices raised, yet no one knew where to begin fixing the small problems that had begun to grow. The community hall remained locked, buckets were missing, and the children ran around the schoolyard with nowhere to sit. For the first time, the town's rhythm felt broken, and nobody could understand why. At the market, the old water tap near the center leaked more than before. Traders shouted at one another, each blaming the other for wasting water. Customers grew impatient, haggling loudly over small prices, frustrated that everything seemed slower than usual. Normally, Mora would have quietly tightened the tap, calmed the traders, and guided the children who came for water. But today, there was no one to notice, no one to quietly fix what was going wrong, and the town began to feel the weight of her absence without even realizing it. By midday, an old man carrying firewood stumbled near the roadside. People hurried past him, worried more about their own baskets than helping him. His frail hands scraped the ground, and his face twisted in pain. A young boy ran to his side but did not know what to do. The town's small acts of kindness that Mora had kept alive were gone. They had depended on her care without ever understanding it. And now, with each moment, the town grew more restless, loud, and chaotic, feeling a loss they could not name. When evening came, Mora stepped outside her small house under the mango tree. The streets were alive with complaints and arguments. Neighbors shouted at each other about water, food, and misplaced objects. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in orange and gold, but Mora did not rush to help. She only watched quietly, her heart heavy and aching. She realized that the town's chaos was a reflection of how unnoticed she had always been. And deep inside, she knew that the day the town finally understood her value was coming closer, but it might already be too late. By the 5th day, the town of Oduk had begun to feel a strange emptiness. Small problems that Mora had always fixed silently were now impossible to ignore. The community hall remained locked, the school chairs were scattered, and the old water tap leaked faster than ever. Traders argued loudly in the market, children cried over forgotten lunches, and the neighbors whispered angrily at one another. For the first time, the town realized that something, or someone, was missing. But no one had yet remembered Mora's name. Mora stayed mostly inside her little house that morning, her hands resting on her lap, her heart heavy. She watched the town from her window, feeling both sorrow and quiet anger. Every shout, every complaint, every small accident outside reminded her of the countless times she had fixed things without notice. She had always been invisible, her work taken for granted. And now, when she had paused even for a single day, the town's cracks had grown into open wounds. In the afternoon, a young girl ran to Mora's door, looking for help with a small problem. "Oh, you live here," the girl said, surprised to see her. Mora only smiled softly and helped her quietly. The girl ran back without a word of thanks, leaving Mora standing in the doorway, realizing just how deeply people had forgotten her. For years, she had carried their worries silently, but in return, she had been ignored, unseen, and unappreciated. That evening, Mora sat under the shade of the tall mango tree in front of her house. She whispered quietly to the empty street, "Perhaps I never belonged here." The town buzzed with arguments and chaos, yet no one asked where she was or why she had stopped helping. For the first time, she thought about leaving Oduk forever, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. She had given too much, quietly, and when a heart gives without being seen, it slowly learns the courage to walk away. The 6th morning in Oduk arrived with a strange tension in the air. People felt restless, though they could not explain why. Small problems that Mora had quietly managed for years had now grown into bigger troubles. The community hall was still locked. The water tap near the market had stopped working entirely, and traders were shouting angrily over lost business. Even the children at school were restless, with no one to guide them. Slowly, the town began to feel the weight of Mora's absence, but no one had yet said her name. Then, it happened. A small fire started in the community hall because the old wires had been left unchecked. Smoke curled into the sky, and panic spread quickly. People ran about, shouting for help, banging on doors, searching for buckets, and calling each other's names. Amid the chaos, a voice finally asked aloud, "Where is Mora?" The question was almost swallowed by the noise, but it struck everyone like a sudden hammer. Heads turned, eyes widened, and whispers began to spread. For the first time, people remembered the quiet woman who had always been there, unseen. A group of women hurried to Mora's small house, knocking frantically at the door. When she opened it, they were nervous, their faces pale with fear and guilt. "We need you," they said all at once. There was no please or sorry, just an urgent demand for the one who had quietly held the town together for years. Mora stood calmly, her eyes steady, her hands folded, as if she had been expecting this moment. She listened quietly to their desperate voices, seeing for the first time just how invisible her work had been. Finally, Mora spoke softly, her voice calm but full of weight. "I needed you too," she said. The words were simple, but they carried years of unnoticed care, sacrifice, and silent labor. The women froze, unable to reply. For the first time, they felt the depth of the cost of ignoring someone like Mora, the quiet, patient, selfless helper who had made their lives easier without ever asking for anything in return. And that night, as Mora returned to her small chair under the mango tree, the town knew, painfully, that they had almost lost something priceless. By the seventh day, the town of Oduk could no longer ignore the truth. Small problems had grown into visible chaos, and people were beginning to whisper about the woman they had always overlooked. The community hall was still damaged, water leaks had flooded the market corners, and children wandered without guidance. Slowly, voices filled with guilt began asking questions: who usually fixes all this? Who has been helping us all these years? For the first time, they remembered Mora. Her name, which had been lost in silence, floated through the town like a fragile lifeline. Neighbors hurried to Mora's small house, their faces pale with shame and confusion. One by one, they brought small gifts, flowers, and hurried apologies. They spoke quickly, hoping their words could repair what had been broken. Mora listened quietly, her calm eyes watching every hurried gesture, every nervous glance. She did not rush to forgive, nor did she immediately smile. Years of unnoticed care had taught her patience, and her quiet strength reminded the town that goodness could not be rushed, and kindness could not be demanded. That evening, Mora spoke to the town for the first time in words loud enough to be heard by everyone. She told them of the small acts she had done for years, the letters delivered, the children guided, the elderly comforted, the problem solved without notice. She spoke of long nights and tired hands, of silent tears and quiet prayers for people who never once asked her how she was. The town listened in shock and shame, realizing the depth of her invisible work. Her kindness had been the backbone of their community, and now they saw how much they had taken for granted. By the time the sun sank behind the mango tree, a heavy silence covered Oduk. People began to understand that Mora's presence had always been priceless. Some whispered apologies. Others wept quietly in their homes. But Mora had already made her choice. She had given all she could, and now her heart longed for rest. Slowly, she walked to the edge of the street, her steps quiet yet full of authority. For the first time, the town saw her clearly, and for the first time, they knew that some things could not be replaced once they were gone. The morning Mora left Oduk was quiet, almost too quiet. The sun rose slowly, casting long shadows over the dusty streets. People peeked from their doors and windows, whispering her name with hesitation and shame. The town had finally realized her worth, but now it was too late to hold her back. Mora walked steadily down the main road, a small bag in her hand, her head held high, and her heart heavy yet peaceful. She carried the weight of years of unseen labor, knowing that her work had mattered, even if others had failed to notice it. Children who had once run past her without greeting now waved timidly, their faces filled with guilt and awe. Adults looked down at the ground, ashamed of how many times they had ignored her. Mora's faint smile, gentle and soft, held forgiveness and a quiet sadness. She did not need their apologies, and she did not seek their gratitude. She only needed her peace, and on that day, she would finally find it. Every step she took away from Oduk was a step toward freedom, toward a life where her heart could rest without being taken for granted. By evening, the town felt empty in a way it had never felt before. The water tap leaked again, the community hall doors were unlocked, and small problems began to grow once more. People began to whisper Mora's name often, and every corner reminded them of what they had lost. They understood at last that Mora had been the quiet force keeping everything together, the woman who had carried their burdens without recognition, the woman whose heart had been their invisible anchor. And now, she was gone. In the silence left behind, the town learned the painful truth: never ignore the ones who give silently, for their absence leaves a hole too deep to fill. Mora became a story that parents told their children, a lesson whispered through generations. Even though she had left, her presence lingered in the way people cared, in the way they helped one another, and in the quiet realization that some of the strongest hearts are the ones nobody notices, until it is too late. Thank you for watching this story. Don't forget to drop your thought and opinion about the story. About Mora on the comment. Please don't forget to subscribe to get more interesting story.